Have you ever preached through a capital campaign?
Nope. But I have preached through multiple resource initiatives, Dave. Resource initiatives. That's what I prefer to call them.
Welcome back to the Preaching Through podcast. My name is Dave. This is Luke, and this is the man who preaches through resource initiatives. What's that all about?
Well, you know what's funny, actually, is I think the first couple times that we did an initiative, I think I did call it either a building campaign or a capital campaign. And then I worked with a coach in the third one. So we've done 4 of these projects. In the third one, I worked with a coach who insisted that we call it a resource initiative. And I actually came to like that terminology. Obviously, it's always funny when people are like, well, what's that? Well, it's kind of like a capital campaign. But, his argument was that nobody likes campaigns. They associate that with politics. And building and capital feels like kind of like impersonal in a way. So, but the idea of like, hey, we all need resources, and an initiative feels positive, feels exciting. So, I internally call it a resource initiative. But I think it's appropriate that we title this episode as "Preaching Through Capital Campaigns" because that's how most people understand it.
My mule trainer client, he insists.
So, just for those who aren't initiated here, Dave has a client who is like the best in the world at helping people learn how to train mules. Mm-hmm. So Dave, de facto, just like you've become a pretty good preaching expert through these podcasts, you've become a mule training expert.
I do know more about mules, I think, than I do about preaching at this point. So room to grow. But he insists these are not mule saddles. These are my saddles. There's no such thing as a mule saddle. You can't get this anywhere else. They're my saddles. And I was like, Steve, I get that. But we have to call it a mule saddle because that's what people are looking for. That's the terminology that they're used to hearing. So, capital campaign.
Let's just call it whatever you want.
Okay, sounds good.
This is when you're trying to raise money to build or to expand or to plant something new or to replace something, right? It's like an extra infusing of resources for the sake of the mission of the church. And whatever you want to call it, that's what we want to talk through is how do you preach through that stuff?
Maybe it would be helpful on the front end to share a little bit about what your experience has been. You've already said we've gone through this before a number of times. Maybe share what those were, maybe the period of time those were, how much time between each one, whatever level you want to get into, but just give a little bit of background on your familiarity with this.
Yeah, so we planted the church at this point about 17 years ago, and so we've done 4 of these projects. The first one was we were meeting in a high school, and we were trying to raise money to be able to move into a commercial warehouse type building that had not had anything in it. So the money that we were raising was going to help with the tenant improvement, like help building it out. So that was the first project, and I think we had maybe a little less than 2 years to be able to try to do that. So that's what we did for that one. The next one was to be able to buy the land that we're currently on. So we bought 10.5 acres. And so we had to raise, I don't even remember now. I'd have to go back and look and see how much we had to raise for that. But that was to be able to purchase the land. The third one was to build the buildings that we then built on that land, which is actually where we're recording this right now. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth one we have just recently completed, and that is to try to expand our campus, add some additional spaces, and essentially what will finish the campus. So other than some big improvements down the road or, renovations of like existing facilities, this will probably finish the footprint of our property. So those 4 initiatives, each one different amounts of money and 4 different things. But that's and it's something that almost nobody prepared me for. So when I was going through all kinds of church planning training, nobody talked about how to do it. And so if I look back now and gone, oh, wow, I would not have told you at the beginning, by 17 years from now, you'll actually be kind of pretty knowledgeable. I don't know if I'd quite say I'm an expert, but I've led personally through 4 of them, and I've consulted with another handful or so of other churches that have done it. So I think I kind of now know a little bit what I'm doing.
But the church isn't 4 years old. 4 capital campaigns, 4 years. Like, how were they spaced out? How often?
Oh, good question.
Do you think that churches should do this regularly, regardless of the need, et cetera?
Well, in a growing church that's especially trying to get a full-time facility or buy land or build on that land, there does tend to be a bit more of a back-to-back-to-back, and the time frame of like what your church needs really drives the speed of those projects. I have heard other people argue, though, that they're so catalytic in terms of solidifying and reminding and recasting vision, which is some of what we'll talk about, that they're actually worth doing every 5 or 6 years. Like come up with some reason to raise money, because when in the raising of the money, you're also casting the vision for the mission. And that even once you like folks like that would say, hey, okay, Luke, once you finish the campus, still in another 5 or 6 years, you should have some sort of initiative for something, because of how clarifying it is for the vision. But so much of it really is driven by what the church needs and the time frame they're on, especially in a church plant situation.
I would imagine there's a number of different types of pastors listening to this. There's some who are right in the middle of this. They're like, this is great. Like, I'm glad they're talking about
or
this.
they're going to think, I wish I'd have had this 2 months ago.
Right. There's some who might be gearing up for this or thinking about gearing up for it. And then there's some who could not be further away from something like this. How might they think about this particular episode, or what might it mean to them?
Well, for the folks that this is like on the horizon for them, this certainly is going to feel more relevant than the people who are in an existing situation. Church is built out. Everything seems fine. But I would tell you, like, there's a lot of how we're going to talk about this is also how you would think about a vision-oriented series. So even if it's like, hey, you don't have any fundraising projects ahead, I would encourage you to hang in there because of some of the vision stuff we'll talk about. But I also would say there might come a time that you don't see that your church actually decides, oh, we need to do something like this. We want to multiply in some new way. We need to start new campuses, or we want to plant new churches, or there's this opportunity that comes up in our city, or there actually turns out to be a bunch of stuff that we have to overhaul on our property, or I'm going to end up at another church someday, and in that church, I'm going to need to do something like this. So I think there's a lot of reasons why you would consider it. And I think we have a good number of people who listen as well who are aspiring lead pastors, or they think someday I might do that. And so let this just be more tools for your tool belt for the future. The lead pastor intensives, I looked for over a decade to try to find places where people would do the kind of thing that those are, and it just doesn't exist, right? You go to a conference, you go to a lot of seminars and workshops, and it's a lot of someone talking, and you have to try to figure out, okay, does any of this connect with my real world?
Having time with the mentors is actually what makes this 10 times more valuable than any conference I've ever been to. The fact that you get accessibility with context to your situation is what makes this priceless. You're able to bring what's on your mind, what's on your heart, what's on your plate to guys who you look up to, and to get their feedback.
What I love about the lead pastor intensives is everyone that comes to that, and it's usually limited to like a dozen lead pastors, they come with their questions, they come with their issues, they come with the stuff they're working on for the next few months, and walk away with a lot of really practical help. So
I think this would be valuable for any lead pastor if you're really wanting to grow in areas of organizational leadership, vision, mission, staff leadership. If you're wrestling with anything, please just come to one of these. It'll be helpful.
So we'll get into the preaching part of it, but I do want to start off with what's the general framework for a resource initiative?
So there's thinking through like, how much can you raise is one question that always comes up in this. And the general rule of thumb is that typically a church can raise about 1.5 times its annual budget, 1.5 to 3 times its annual budget. So just to keep real clear round numbers, if a church had a budget of $1 million, typically in a 3-year initiative, they could raise $1.5 million to $3 million, right? So in that range. And one of the things that's important to say is it's the same amount of work to do a 2-year initiative as it is to do a 3-year initiative, but you just get more money in the 3-year initiative. Now, there might be reasons to pick a shorter time frame because of certain deadlines or things you have to hit, but part of what you have to think about in this process, just practically as people give, is some people buy their cars with cash, and in the same way that some people buy their cars with cash, some people are going to give to an initiative with big 1 or 2 time gifts, right? Then there's a lot of people who buy their cars with a monthly payment. And there's more people in a resource initiative who are going to give monthly. And so for the people who are giving $50 a month, $250 a month, whatever it is, well, if you do 36 months versus 24 months, that's just more money. So typically I encourage people, unless there's some time constraint, plan on doing a 3-year initiative. And again, you can raise 1.5 to 3 times your annual budget. Now, everyone hears that and goes, oh, well, we'll probably raise 3. And the big difference between 1.5 to 3 times is how many high capacity donors you have in your church. So, and by that, I mean people who would typically give $75,000 plus a year. How many of those people do you have? If you have a lot of those people, then you maybe have a chance at getting closer to 3 times. If you don't, it's probably more like 1.5. And the other key factor is how attractive is the project, right? So for a first building for a church, they're going to move out of a school and into their first full-time facility. That's an attractive project, right? To build a new kids wing that's going to really just be awesome for the kids in your church and community. That's really attractive. To redo the parking lot, not so much. To add more office space for the staff, not so much, right? To redo the HVAC system, not so much. So the more attractive it is and the more high capacity people you have in terms of the financial side, the more opportunity you have to raise more money. So that's the financial piece of it.
What about the sequencing of it and the ordering and kind of process for running one?
So if you're trying to do it well, and again, sometimes there's just time constraints where you can't really run it this way. It's like, we have an opportunity. This thing came for sale. We've got to go right now. So when that happens, that just has to happen.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, what I typically would try to do is have the commitment for it be late in the year, like in October or November. And the reason for that is that you're going to end up getting year-end giving connected to this project multiple times. So you'll get it in the commitment year, and then you get it in year 1, and you get it year 2, and you get it in year 3. So you actually get 4 year ends. So if you think about that's like commitment time is say November in the year, and then you back up from there, what you'd want to do is probably start in about August or September having formal vision meetings with key leaders and key people. And typically what we've done is we just invite everybody who's given anything over the last year, we invite them to a vision meeting. Even before that, if you knew this was coming in the summer or in the spring, you'd want to be having lunches and coffees with volunteers, with givers, with people who have influence in your church, and just kind of leaking the vision, going, hey, here's some stuff we're dreaming about. Here's some stuff we're praying about. Here's some stuff on the horizon. Do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any suggestions? Like, as you think about the future, what do and you're inviting people to engage their hearts in it. So you're doing that informally, maybe spring and summer. Early fall, you're starting to have like official vision meetings in a smaller, like when our church was a little smaller, we did these vision meetings in a bunch of homes. So we did 6 or 7 across lots of different homes, and people would come in groups of 25 or 30 people. This last time, because our church is larger and we just have more people that needed to come, we did those at the church building. But you're doing that months in advance of the actual commitment because you're trying to give people time to pray, time to process, time to figure out their financial situation and really work through it. And then leading up to that commitment day or commitment month, that time in November or October, or if it's a different time of year, just leading in the time of commitment, that's when you're going to do a series that's going to be related to this project. And that, I think, should be almost always a vision-oriented series. So when we've done it, it's typically been 4 weeks or 5 weeks. It has the same name as the initiative. So the most recent initiative we did was called the Until Initiative. We said, someday Jesus is coming back, but until he does, here's what we have to be doing. In the past, we've had other name, but that name, Until, becomes the name of the series. But the messages in that series become all about vision and saying, here's who we are, here's who we're trying to be, here's who God shaped us. Here, because the whole idea is that a new building or an expanded building for a stagnant church is not going to fix anything, right? That whole, like, if you build it, they will come. That might work in a fantasy movie about baseball in Iowa, but that doesn't work. Like, if God's not stirring something in a church, if things are pretty stagnant and pretty stale and pretty like plateaued, a new building isn't going to fix that. New buildings work only when there's churches that are growing and have momentum and that sort of thing. So you want to talk about the momentum, and you want to talk about the vision, and you want to talk about the heart, and you want to talk about the character. Some of it will be about the money, and we can talk about this more, but that's the general framework of how you do it.
Would you characterize it as a vision sermon series as you start to think about putting it in your calendar, or would you see this as a Vision Series A, and then there's Vision Series B, which is not connected to a capital campaign? Like, how closely tied would you see them as?
You certainly could do a vision series, and I think our very first episode was about vision series, and you could do a vision series that had nothing to do with something like this. But this needs to be a vision-oriented series. What's the why? Why are we building this? Why are we expanding? Why are we buying that land? Why are we doing this? And that's not just like why exactly is it this many seats? But like, why at all? Like, why are we going to sacrifice for this? Why is this worth it? So you're casting vision around that. And there's times where you're answering nuts and bolts of questions about the specific project, but you're not really preaching about the project. You're preaching about the heart behind the project. And that's what the series becomes. So like I would say, if you're preaching one of these series and then you're planning on 2 months later doing a vision series, you probably don't need to do that. Like, this could carry the weight of that. But you might go, all right, I'm going to do this capital campaign series. But then in a year from now or a year and a half from now, I might do another vision-oriented series that has nothing to do with that project. It's just a vision series.
So one of the episodes we did in that first season where we talked about preaching through a vision series was preaching through a sermon calendar. That in the episode that we did on efficient sermon prep, you're like, that's the most important thing right out the gate is getting the calendar nailed down. How might this influence your preaching calendar? Because I know you like to be 12, 18 months ahead. If somebody is ahead, did you just look at it and be like, we're just going to bump everything out? To what extent did it impact your calendar?
When we were planning our sermon calendar for this year, and we knew that we might have an initiative, so it was not clear that we would for sure, we tried to make sure that we had a fall sermon series that was flexible enough that if we needed to break it or rearrange it in some way, that would be pretty doable. So that's what we did. The other thing I would consider is, especially for churches who, like, their bread and butter is more expositional, sequential preaching through books of the Bible or through portions of Scripture, this kind of a series will feel more like a topical series. And so I know some churches, like, they get a little nervous if there's too much topical teaching. And so I would say if that's your situation, make sure that around the time of this series, you're doing more sequential stuff so that it doesn't feel like a topical thing and then another topical thing and another. So again, people have different sensitivities or concerns related to that. But yeah, mostly I would just say, make sure that if you know it's coming, well, then you just treat it like any other series, and there it is. If you're thinking, well, we might do this, then I would just not create a calendar around that time that is overly rigid and can't be adjusted very well, because there's a very good chance you might go, we're going to need 4 of these weeks to be able to break from whatever and focus on this.
How did you think about the passages? Before each service, we have a passage that's read to the whole congregation. Everyone stands if they can. How did you think through the passages that would be tied to the individual messages? Were they things that were particularly close to you, that were derived from the values? Were they the week of, you're like, I really think this passage connects? How do you have that scriptural tie into something that is more topical?
That's a great question. So on this most recent initiative we did, again, we called it Until the Lord Returns, here's who we're working to be. So for that, we just looked at what our church's strategic values are. So we have these strategic values that we actually developed just a few years ago, which the nice part there is, when you're starting the church, you have these values and they're all aspirational and hopeful. Like, maybe we'll become, like, we hope to become this.
Yeah.
Well, when we re-looked at that a decade and a half in and go, oh, well, this is actually who we are. And so, we enjoy Jesus together. We fight for kids and families. We shine light in the darkness. We give it away. We serve like crazy. Those are our strategic values. That's what they are. So it's like, okay, I know that that's what the series is going to be. We're just going to preach through those values. And then I'm just selecting a text that fits with whatever the thing is, right? So we enjoy Jesus together. So I found Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of God is like a man who found treasure hidden in a field, and in his joy, he sold all that he had and bought that field. Jesus is the treasure, right? So I'm focused on that. So that was how I approached that. The previous initiative many years ago, the last one we did before that was called Home Away from Home. And the whole idea was that as we are trying to build a church campus, we're trying to say, let's give people a taste. Like, there's the ultimate home when Jesus returns, but the church right now is supposed to be a little taste of that home. So we're a home away from home. So in that series, I forget exactly what all of the messages were, but they all somehow tied and related to home, right? a home where we can grow spiritually, a home where we can find new life, a home where we, right? So each message had that sort of phrase. And again, you're just looking at a passage, just like you would with a topical series. You go, okay, this passage really connects well with the kind of thing we're talking about. And that's how we pick it.
So the place I want to go now is we're talking about raising funds for a resource.
Yeah.
And does that mean that this is just an entire series on money? Obviously not, because you just said here are the ones that we're talking about, but I feel like it could easily become that, or feel like it needs to be that. So why isn't it, or why would it not be a sermon series just on raising money?
Well, I think you should at some point preach sermon series related to money. And we did an episode about how to preach about money. And so I would say these work really well when you've done the work over time to cultivate generosity. And the way you do that is that every year or two, you have some sort of extended teaching related to money, not always on giving, but something related to money. I think a key piece of it is doing the 90-day tithe challenge. This is one of the resources we have. We have a training day on that with Faithful and Fruitful.
Best $27 you will ever spend in your life.
I mean, honestly, dude, it really is. Like for $27, you could like increase your church's giving over the next year by probably 20 to 30%. So, I mean, it's a great resource. So I would do that. I also have as a regular part of our church's rhythm that every year we're doing like a little mini initiative called a Christmas offering, right? So when you're cultivating a culture of generosity, well, now you're doing a big project and it's less panic button. Like, how do I get people to finally cough it up? Like that's what everyone's afraid of is that, I know this is going to be a 4-week series called Cough It Up. Nobody wants that, right? And yet if you haven't done some work to develop some of that and teach on some of that, then that becomes a more legitimate threat. But the reality is people don't give mostly out of obligation to give. They give to success. They give to vision. They give to relationship. They give because they trust you. And they give because they want to be obedient to the Lord. So part of this should include money. Like every time we've done one of these campaigns, at least one of the weeks relates to giving, relates to how do you decide how much to give and all that sort of thing. But to have it be every week is just usually too much. Like you're not doing the project because you need the money. You need the money because you're doing the project. And you're doing the project because you have another vision that matters to you in terms of what it looks like to advance disciple making and spiritual maturity and evangelism, right? And so preach on that. That's the real why. The money is to facilitate the building, which is to facilitate the mission. So focus on the mission.
One of the things that I think is very important in this is to cast visual pictures of what we're actually headed towards. Words like more impact or better or just vague, abstract adjectives are not helpful at all.
Right.
You want to actually land the plane because people know what landing the plane looks like. I think I've shared this in a past episode. I'll share it again. One of the conferences I went to about marketing, they were talking about creating visual pictures with your copywriting. And there was one guy who was selling a course on how to build a legacy for your family. And so the speaker asked the guy, what does it look like to have a legacy? He says, well, you'll have more impact over time. He's like, I can't see what impact looks like. Like, I don't like, are you talking about a bomb coming down and like impacting the ground? He goes, no. He's like, what can I see? He goes, well, people will remember your name in generations to come. Okay, I kind of get that, but like, how is that actually going to show up? Like, are you talking about people sitting around a table? Like, that's not compelling. Finally, the guy got so frustrated. He says, they're going to build a monument to you in front of City Hall. He goes, that's what I'm talking about. A little extreme, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, you can see what a monument looks like, and you know that that person is leaving a legacy. And so as you're preaching, you want to be casting pictures of what the new reality is actually going to look like. And so if you're watching on YouTube right now, we are sitting in room 100, and this is the primary gathering room for so much of what happens on campus. As you were talking, you talked about room 100, but you also said the box that we're in right now, it's often too big for a lot of the things we want to do. We make it work. Room 100 is kind of too small. We're going to be building a facility that is in the middle of these that can really house our students properly and give us another facility that we can use on Sunday mornings for gatherings. And that immediately, I know what room 100 looks like. I know what the box looks like. yes, I do think we need something in between. And then you cast a vision of what could be in there. So I realize I'm talking, but is there anything you want to say as a follow-up to that?
I think what you're describing is exactly right. And I'd take it even one step further,
Yeah.
which is that not only do they need to see like the picture of what you're doing, and a lot of times as you're doing this, you have renderings, you
Yeah.
have stuff that helps with that. But they also need to be reminded of how they've already seen what you're talking about.
Mhm.
You just need to see it at a different scale. So this is, I mean, people are really excited to give to a student building because we've demonstrated over the years how much we care about kids and the next generation. And we have a whole weekend each year where it's like dedicated to like this in-town camp thing. And the whole service becomes different. And like people have seen, they know that our small group mentors for junior high and high school begin with the kids in 6th grade and finish with them in 12th grade. And they move up every single year. And so that's a lot of what you're doing in these series is you're storytelling, you're reminding, you're saying, here's who we've been. Like people say everyone gives to vision. They do give to vision, but they give to success. They give to successful vision, like a previous vision that worked. And they go, oh, I want to give to more of that because that'll actually work. I don't want to waste my money on something that's not going to work. And so a lot of what you're doing is you're finding the bright spots, you're finding the highlights, you're finding hey, this is evidence that God's at work here. What if we could do more of that? What if we could expand that? So this is why, in these series, a lot of times you're having testimonies or you're doing videos or you're doing that sort of stuff. And again, on the surface, people go, oh, they're doing all these videos and all this stuff because they need the money. And it's like, well, there's a little truth to that. But also, these videos and stories and things, they so capture the heartbeat. They so capture the vision. I mean, in the week we did recently, we fight for kids and families. And I interviewed one of our great kids volunteers who he's been teaching kids for a couple of years. He plans to go with these kids all the way to, they're currently in 5th grade. He's been with them since 3rd grade. He plans to be with them till they graduate high school. I mean, this guy's all in. And he's in tears in a video saying, if we don't fight for kids, Instagram will, TikTok will, like they're worth fighting for. And it's like, yes. Now, do I hope that will make people want to give money to what will be part of this project with the student building? Sure. Of course I do. But what I really want is a church that fights for kids and families. Like that's, because if we're that kind of church, well, then God will certainly use that passion to develop the resources we need to have the facility we need. So, but it's all about that vision.
For somebody who's not rehearsed or necessarily gifted in thinking in these pictures, I know you considered yourself someone who is like, I can teach in principles, but I don't really teach in pictures. You've worked really hard at getting better at teaching in pictures. What are maybe some exercises or things that they might be able to do to begin to flex that muscle of preaching in pictures and showcasing what God has done on the campus? What are some techniques or some exercises that might be helpful?
One would be a brainstorm just around analogies. If we had to come up with some sort of analogy or parable to describe this, what would we do? So that's an interesting exercise. Another one, this was actually something our architect made us do before we built this, is there were a few of us as pastors that were part of the group working with the architecture firm on the design. And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you each individually, don't work together. This is not a group project. Each individually write a narrative, write a story of someone interacting with the campus that we're going to design. And he said, don't make it like prescriptive. Don't make it like Joe came on campus and walked 10 feet and he looked right and there was a restroom. like don't make it like that, but just tell a story of people experiencing this. And I'll tell you what, man, that like when we all, we told really different stories. Like one of the guys in it, he talked about, his story was all about this young girl who'd grown up in the church and then walked away from Jesus for a while and then came back and was having her wedding at the church building and was reflecting on what the church had meant to her. And then, my story was different. And, but exercises like that are kind of abstract and they're kind of weird. Like sometimes I think we get a little stuck because we're like, it's so on the nose that we're trying to explain exactly something. And it's like, force yourself into some kind of creative exercise. I'd maybe even put into AI, hey, I'm trying to come up with some analogies for some stuff. What are some exercises I could do to do it? Now, don't just short circuit and ask the AI to come up with the analogies for you. Ask the AI to give you some exercises so that you can come out of it. Because as you develop this and as you take the time to brainstorm and to think and to craft and to wordsmith and you start bouncing it off of people and you figure out what resonates and what doesn't, by the time you get to like on stage preaching about it, casting that vision, it'll come from a place that's authentic in you. If this is just like cut and paste from AI or cut and paste from some pastor you respect and how they worded it, it's just not going to ring with the same authenticity.
The episode we did, Preaching Through Busyness in Ministry, we talked about how you had done a Reignite tour and you had gone around and met with different people in the church that you had spent lots of time with, but just hadn't really connected with. And that gives you perspective on what's going on in people's lives in the heart of the church. You had shared that you had been doing, what did you call the lunches?
Ownership lunches.
Ownership lunches. And how after each one of those, there'd be like 20 people that all share what the church, means to them. And you'd go home each time, be like, I just love our church. Like those type of exercises too will put you directly in contact with the people who are bringing the ministry to life and who are experiencing just the significance of Jesus in what the church is doing. And I think don't do those exercises because you need their stories. Do those exercises because you want to be a part of the community that God is building. But out of that, those are great, vivid pictures to help influence and shape. And as you're thinking about not just this message, but any message, like I'm preaching to this person right here. I'm preaching to that person, right? How is this message going to impact this person who shared this at that ownership lunch? So with all of these different techniques that we can do and all of the different approaches that are best practices or worth thinking about, are there cautions that you would share or obstacles that we should anticipate needing to overcome throughout this process?
One of the things that I would warn you against is, even despite all the pre-work you do and all the advanced meetings and all the vision stuff and all the stuff, is there are still people who walk in on that day that you kick off the series and are like, wait, we're doing what? And by that point, you're so stinking tired of talking about it. You feel like, I'm almost bored with this. But to remember, this is the first time they've heard about it. And so tapping into the why for you becomes really important. So at a heart level, that's significant. But there's also probably an importance of making sure early on in a series like this, you are taking some portion of it where you're explaining the project. It's a little more nuts and bolts. Here's what we're building. Here's how many seats it'll be. Here's how many parking spots. Here's why we're doing this. No one wants a full sermon on that. But for you to spend 5 to 10 minutes in a message explaining here's what we're doing, that feels pretty important. Like you don't want people walking out of this capital campaign series after a week or two going, so what are we building? What is this? You want that to be very clear on the front end so that the rest of that series can then be tapping into the heart of it and can be them thinking about, okay, how much can I give to this, right? So that would be something is make sure that you talk through some of the nuts and bolts. I think another thing you want to do along the way is you want to give some sort of opportunity for people to talk about and pray about this project and the vision behind it. In our last initiative, we had a prayer meeting with members partway through it. And one of the things I've just realized over the years is you don't actually know if people get the vision until you hear them pray for it. A lot of times people hear the pastor share compelling vision and they're like, yeah. Oh, I love this vision. I love this vision. And then you hear them pray and they don't pray in any of the same language. They don't pray with any of the same heart. And you can tell they admire this vision, but they don't inhabit it yet. They don't live it yet. And so giving people opportunities to pray and to process. And over time, what you see is their prayers actually start to reflect the scripture you're talking about. And that's a really exciting thing. So I think that would be another thing that I would do with people. And then one more caution that I have is that people feed off the energy and the anxiety and the confidence, pick your word, of the leader. So if it's mostly like you are anxious and worried and nervous that like this isn't we may not have enough money, that will come out and that people will feed off of that. If this is like, I've got to get these people to cough it up, that will come out. If you are really confident that this is what the Lord's leading us to do, and this is why I believe in this project, and I think you should too, that will come out. So this is why these things are so helpful in terms of just how God even disciples you as a preacher and as a pastor. Is it's refining. Like it helps refine your character to go like, am I trusting the Lord? Am I leading from vision or from insecurity? Which is it? Because people will feed off of that. And so having all those different opportunities to take trial runs at experimenting with this, that becomes really helpful because it does help build your confidence, smooth out your anxiety, and make it a good experience.
One of the stories that you've shared about a past capital campaign was actually a perceived failure, your failure, to actually generate the funds. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was. I'm so grateful for it because it really was a significant season of growth for me, just spiritually with the Lord. So the particular project, we were trying to raise $1.8 million in giving and in commitments. And commitment day came, and after commitment day, I said, all right, what was the total? And it was around $1.6 million. And it was interesting because we had a small group of volunteers who were responsible for tabulating stuff and tracking it and entering it into our database and whatever. And all those people were so excited. They were like, Luke, this is amazing. We can't believe how much money people have given. This is incredible. And they don't know all the people involved, but they would look at some of the commitments and go like, wow, I can't believe that person would be that generous. Like, that's incredible. So they were just totally caught up in the like, wow, isn't this amazing? And especially the athlete in me and the competitor in me was like, the goal was 1.8. We hit 1.6. 1.6 is not 1.8. We lost. Like failure, like very black and white, win or lose, and we lost. And I also felt like, okay, not only did we lose, but I'm the loser. Like if I'm the lead pastor, it somehow felt like a referendum on my leadership. And here's what's really awkward about all this. It a little bit is. Like there is a reality. If people don't trust the lead pastor, they're not going to be very generous towards the lead pastor's vision. On the other hand, they might totally believe in the lead pastor and just resources or other things keep them from participating in the way they might want. So it's not entirely a referendum on you. It is a little bit, but I was overly inhabiting that and feeling like we lost and I'm a loser and it's my fault. And and in the next few days, as I was processing that disappointment, I just was experiencing these nudges of the Holy Spirit kind of going, hey, really? Like you thought this was about you? Because you never said that. Like all these weeks you've been preaching about this, you never one time made an indication that you thought this was about you. Is this about you now? If you'd raised $2 million, would it have been like, oh, you're the best? And so it was this very like sweet, confrontational, convicting experience with the Lord over that time. And I'm really grateful that God was also merciful in it, and that not only did he lead me to a place of repentance and like, okay, this isn't about me, and I'm going to just trust the Lord that he'll provide what he provides at the time he provides it. But also then what happened is we had about 2 weeks between that commitment day and the day we announced it. And in that time, more commitments came, more money came. And it turned out actually on the day, we were $751 short of the goal. And so it ended up being fun because on the day we announced the number and I said, so, hey, we got good news and bad news. Bad news is we didn't quite hit the goal. Good news is if anyone is willing to write a check for $751, we could hit our goal. And actually that day, 3 people gave me those checks. And so we exceeded the goal. But but I learned that through the process. And but man, then when you do another initiative like the one we just most recently did, it's still a hard lesson to remember that because it does. I mean, it pokes at all of your insecurities as a leader, and you have to, in the end, go, I'm trusting the Lord. Now, here's the other thing. And again, I realize this is our situation. This isn't the case everywhere. But what actually ended up coming into that project that was about 1.8 million in commitments was about $2.3 million. So that's the other thing to remember is there's what people commit to give. Sometimes they're not going to give that much. They're going to give less. And sometimes people are going to give way more. So you do have to try to believe all the stuff you tell people, which is God provides, you trust him, he's good, your identity's in him. But that's always easier said than done.
What I love about even that last that message, you announced it. Good news, or the bad news is we didn't quite hit it. The good news is if anybody wants to write a check, just a micro illustration of how God takes, we just need one check and God provides three.
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it feels like God didn't even provide the one. But when you finally see God's provision and you're like, wow, he's generous. I didn't expect this. I think that's cool.
Well, and the whole process builds your faith. And it when you're done with it, it's a little bit like after a woman has a baby, she's like, I'm never doing that again. Like this was a really hard thing. I was just
we've heard.
I was just talking. Yeah, that's right. I was just talking with a guy the other day who just finished one and was like, I'm so tired. I'm wiped out. And there is a lot of energy that goes into these things. On the other hand, they're really good. They're really refining. And after some period of time, you go, you know what? That was painful and that was a lot of work and that was hard, but that was really worth it. And I'd do it again. And so I think there is something to the value of making sure you have some vision to talk about and having some stories to tell. I heard someone say recently, like, if you don't have stories to tell about what God's doing, then you should just resign. Like, if you don't have something to celebrate, like, what are you doing? And so these projects, they just remind you, oh yeah, I've got to do that. I've got to cast that vision. I've got to hear those stories. I've got to share those stories. And God really works in beautiful ways through it.
I hope you enjoy this episode of Preaching Through Podcast. Really want to thank you for listening and showing up week in and week out and allowing us to be just one voice, encouraging you in this very important discipleship making tool of preaching. So thank you for sharing that with us. If you have any questions, or if there's anything you'd like for us to talk about, you can send us a message, info@faithfulandfruitful.com. Every single episode, we do show notes, and the resources that we mentioned are included in those show notes. So if you'd like to go back and pinpoint some of the things that we've mentioned, you can find that there. Lastly, we have faithfulandfruitful.com, where you can sign up for upcoming training days. These are free webinar style events where we tackle different aspects of ministry that aren't necessarily covered in seminary. So they're very helpful. They're very practical. You can check that out, as well as dates for our lead pastor leadership intensives. Luke, thanks so much for sharing. Anything you want to end this episode on?
Just want to make it available that I have done some consulting on these. And so if people are thinking about a project and would be interested in working together on making it good, not just from the preaching side, but the whole planning and sequencing. That'd be something that I'd love to hear from you about if you think maybe we could help. And if I can't help you, I know I can connect you with some people who could, but perhaps there'd be some folks that would be fun to work together on that. So just make that available. And it's a great time.
Luke at faithfulandfruitful.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.